I was spending the weekend completely alone at my cabin-style house on the edge of town, a place that wasn't isolated in the middle of nowhere, but secluded enough that the surrounding homes were spaced so far apart you could go days without seeing another person. It was the kind of neighborhood people drove past without a second thought, because unless you were actively looking, all you'd notice was an endless forest of trees. It was winter, right after a heavy snowfall, and the silence felt thicker than usual, the snow blanketing everything in a way that made the woods behind my house appear darker, deeper, and more foreboding than ever. Despite that, I usually didn't mind the solitude. The house was exactly what I wanted: cozy, filled with large windows, a stone fireplace, and that warm cabin atmosphere that had convinced me to move there in the first place. That first night was normal for the most part. I stayed up late watching YouTube in the living room, half asleep by midnight, before finally turning off the TV and heading to bed. Because the house was one story, my bedroom sat at the very end of the hallway, and like the rest of the house, it featured massive floor-to-ceiling windows and even a sliding glass door that opened directly toward the woods. Given how private the area was, the design made sense, but at night, it could feel unsettling. Sometimes even catching my own reflection in the glass would make my heart jump, as if someone were standing outside. That night, though, something felt different. As soon as I turned off the lights and climbed into bed, I heard a soft cracking sound from outside, too loud to be an animal, more like the snap of a thick branch under someone's weight. Then it happened again. I sat up, staring at the darkened window, and because the room lights were off, I could see clearly into the woods. I watched for nearly 30 seconds before noticing movement, a subtle shift of darkness between two pine trees, not a clear shape, just a shadow that leaned into view or slipped out of it. After that, everything went still. I waited for minutes, nerves building, convincing myself it had to be my imagination before finally checking that the sliding door was locked and returning to bed. Sleep didn't come easily. Every half minute, I felt compelled to open my eyes and look back toward the window, but I never saw anything. The next day was worse in a quieter way. Nothing happened, yet everything felt wrong. I couldn't shake the sensation of being watched, of someone standing just out of sight, and I kept glancing toward windows behind me, expecting to see eyes staring back. As evening fell and snow began to fall again, I relaxed slightly, reasoning that no one would be lurking outside in those conditions. Around 10 p.m., I sat wrapped in a blanket by the fireplace watching TV, unaware of how dark the house had become until I stood up to grab a soda. Walking down the hallway, I noticed the light in the small den my ambient lighting room was off, even though I was certain I'd left it on. I flipped it back on without much thought and returned to the couch. But less than a minute later, I glanced over my shoulder and felt my blood run cold. The light was off again. I approached the hallway just enough to see the switch physically flip down, and in that moment, I knew someone was inside the house deliberately trying to lure me in. Panic took over as I quietly backed away, realizing my phone was charging in my bedroom and my keys were by the front door. Moving carefully, I slipped into my room, grabbed my phone, and then I saw movement behind the glass. At first, I noticed faint footprints in the snow, then followed them to a massive figure standing just feet from the window. I couldn't see his face, but I knew he was watching me. I ran for the front door, keys in hand, hearing not one, but two sets of footsteps moving on the other side of the house. I bolted to my car, and as I got inside, the same figure came sprinting around the corner toward me. I started the engine and sped away, watching him stand in the driveway as I escaped. When police arrived 30 minutes later, what they found was horrifying. Shattered windows, doors and cabinets ripped from hinges, furniture overturned, walls dented and torn apart. I told them I'd heard at least two people inside and seen one outside, but the damage made it impossible to understand how they'd moved so quietly while I was home. I stayed in a hotel for weeks after, eventually selling the house, unable to shake the knowledge that 3 people had been stalking me for who knows how long. Even now, I still have nightmares of standing in that hallway, slowly walking toward the darkened room, knowing exactly what was waiting just beyond the doorway. My name is Noah, and I'm 36 years old. To understand what happened to me, You need some context. 2 years earlier, my wife and I had split up just months after buying a massive house together, far too big even for the two of us, but meant to be something we'd grow into with kids and dogs someday. After the breakup, I was left with a choice: sell the house at a loss or continue living there alone. I chose to stay. For 2 years, I lived by myself in that enormous, mostly empty home, telling myself I'd eventually use the space for an office, a gym, or something meaningful, but I never did. Entire rooms sat untouched for months, doors closed on hollow, dusty spaces, and sometimes the emptiness mixed with loneliness in a way that felt unsettling. Eventually, I decided to adopt a dog, something I'd wanted for years. That's when everything changed. I adopted an 8-month-old beagle named Piper, picking her up from a shelter 3 hours away and arriving home around 8 p.m. At first, she explored the yard excitedly, but the moment she stepped inside, her demeanor changed. She became timid, sticking close to me, eventually climbing onto my lap as if she was afraid of something I couldn't see. I brushed it off as new home anxiety. That night, and the following morning seemed fine, but later that day, while I worked upstairs, Piper suddenly left the room and began barking frantically from downstairs. I found her standing in an empty room, staring at the wall, trembling, clearly terrified. That night, I woke up to find her standing at the bedroom door, staring at the gap in the doorway, but somehow I fell back asleep. The next day repeated itself until evening, when Piper vanished again. I found her in the same downstairs room, frozen with fear. As I turned to approach her, I caught a glimpse of someone peering down the hallway near the stairs. I slammed the door shut, locked it, and listened as calm, confident footsteps approached, paused outside the door, and then walked away. When I finally emerged, the front door was wide open. Police later found signs someone had been secretly living in my home, sleeping in a closet during the day, moving freely at night. Piper had sensed him long before I did. I sold the house soon after and moved into something smaller, grateful for the dog that may have saved my life, though I still wonder if the man was ever truly gone. I was 18 years old, home alone while my parents were away for a few days, spending the time like I always did, watching TV and playing video games in our quiet suburban home. One morning, while making breakfast, my friend texted me asking who the guy outside my house was. Confused, I checked the window and saw nothing, but my friend insisted he'd seen a man trying to look into my windows. We brushed it off and played games for hours until night fell. Later, while cooking dinner, I noticed a shadow flicker across the wall. I convinced myself it was nothing. Upstairs, alone in the dark hallway, unease crept in, and when I went downstairs again, I heard footsteps that seemed to mirror my own. Realizing someone might be inside the house, I locked myself in my room and called the police. While waiting, my friend spotted the same man fleeing from the side of my house into the trees. Officers later told us of a similar case nearby, another kid home alone, another man lurking. The intruder was never caught. And even now, I don't know what he planned to do that night, only that I was never truly alone.